Hey! Hey, stop! Stop! Take Jerome Pruitt with you! Please! Please! There was 3 games ending at basically the same time yesterday that were just, I mean, absolute great nail-biting games. And obviously, 3 games, 6 teams, 3 of those teams had to lose, and that just is what it is. I mean, unfortunately, half the teams that play every Saturday have to lose. But those 3 games that ended around 10 or 10:30 last night, the Miami North Carolina game, the BYU Tennessee game, and the Texas LSU game, absolutely amazing. That's why I went with the 3 TVs out here. It's nice to sit out here at noon and watch Michigan versus Army and Purdue versus Vandy and Ohio State versus Cincinnati. Yeah, I mean, that's great and all, but 3 games ending at the same time like that, great endings to all 3. Unbelievable. So now that we have the pleasantries out of the way, wow. Man, there are a lot of teams who are who we thought they were. There are some teams that are a lot better than we thought they were. And there are some teams that might as well start focusing on 2020 recruiting, or maybe even 2021 or 2022, because the product that you're putting on the field is just abysmal, to say the least. And unfortunately, there are a lot of fan bases today that are having to wake up in what they think is an alternate reality, but what the rest of us know is actual reality and has been reality for a really, really long time. 2 fan bases in particular, well, 3 fan bases in particular that really, really fit into this category. Copious notes. You guys know I sit out here from 9 in the morning till 2 in the morning, watch these games. I streamed yesterday for over 8 hours, about 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock here on the YouTube channel. And then for the nighttime games from 7 till about 11, we streamed on the Patreon page. And man, the endings of those games, like I said, absolutely unbelievable. But fortunately, you know, for some of these teams, it's a different verse, same as the first. Some of these teams are making this list for the very first time. But per usual, here we go. All right, so let's just jump right in here. Sort of a special edition today of the Your Season Is Over list. I mean, I could easily have picked 4 teams again, like I try to do every Sunday. I try to go with 4 teams for this list. I mean, I could have picked about 12 this week. Here's what I decided to do, though. Jerome Pruitt, your coaching career is over. It's obvious to anybody with a set of working eyeballs that you just don't have what it takes, and the reason is irrelevant. Is it that you can't get the players motivated? Is it that you're getting out coached? Is it that you just don't know what you're doing? Is it that you hired a bad staff? It really doesn't matter. The point is, you're the head coach of Tennessee, and you can't beat Georgia State or BYU, both at home. Now, obviously, the Georgia State loss, I think, was still a lot worse than the BYU loss. But the point is, you lost to BYU in a game that you absolutely had to win for an entire multitude of reasons. Bowl eligibility, gone, out the window. So yes, Tennessee's season is 100% over. They are not making a bowl game. And that was the realistic goal of sane Tennessee fans. Now, you had the potato eaters with the, we're going to beat Florida or Georgia, one of the two. Keep it close with Bama, but probably lose and have a chance to win the East at the end. I mean, no one was buying into that. No one was drinking that flavor Kool-Aid outside of a select group of extremely special ed Tennessee fans. But the problem now is you're 0-2, 2 home games losses to bad teams that you should beat, and you couldn't find a way to do it. Now, the BYU game was a good game. It came down to the end or whatever, but the entire problem with Tennessee's program right now, really, outside of Jeremy Pruitt and coaching, can be summed up on the last play of that BYU game where they scored the winning touchdown. You stand them up at the 2-yard line. You've got 5 or 6 defenders there, and you've got the running back, and then you've got 5 or 6, or 5, I guess, 4 maybe. One of them was off to the side maybe. Anyway, you got a handful of BYU players on about the 2-yard line, and you got a handful of Tennessee players at the 1.5-yard line. They meet. BYU wanted it more. They outmuscled you. They outwilled you. They outwanted it more. I just made that up. And they just, honestly, they bullied you right into your own end zone for the game-winning score. For those of you that are around my age, I'm 41, you'll remember a movie called The Program, a college football movie back in the day that's loosely based on the current version of Clemson. You had a bunch of players that were juicing up in that movie. And the one player in particular, Latimer was his name. He was a defensive lineman, a linebacker maybe? Linebacker. And there's that famous scene in the movie where he's been juicing the whole movie, right? And he's one of the best defensive players in America. And the coaches catch him or whatever, and they tell him he can't juice anymore, so he quits juicing. He goes out a couple of weeks later. Very similar situation to BYU and Tennessee. The other team is on the goal line getting ready to score the game-winning touchdown. Running back gets the ball. There's a hole. He hits the hole. He gets literally to about the 1-yard line. Latimer meets him right in the hole, head up. It's sort of a stalemate. And then the running back pushes Latimer backwards, and Latimer falls into the end zone. And after the game, he immediately makes the decision to go back to juicing. That's what it looked like. BYU just bullied you into the end zone there with the game on the line. They wanted it more, and they came out on top. Now, what happened last week and what happened this week for Tennessee is unacceptable, and that's bad enough. But then you get to looking at the schedule. Okay, you play UT something or another next week, whether UT Martin, UT Chattanooga, whatever it is. I'm still going out on a limb here and saying Tennessee is going to win that game, okay? So that's going to put you at 1-2. Your next 3 games after that are Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. That's going to put you at 1-5, okay? You're going to be 1-5. Believe you play South Carolina after that. You've never beat Will Muschamp. A couple of years ago under Lyle, Butch Jones, you had a 9-win season. You lost to Will Muschamp that year. You're 1-6. Who's left to what games are winnable on Tennessee's schedule at this point outside of maybe the game this coming weekend against whoever it is, and maybe UAB later in the year. But the problem with a UAB game is by the time that game comes around, what are you going to be? When do you play them? You're going to be 1-7, 1-8. What is it? 1-9. I'll be honest, I don't see at this point, and I know Tennessee has been through more than its fair share of coaching searches and all that, and I don't understand what the point is of keeping Jeremy Pruitt at this point. It seems to me you've either got to fire. Are you going to fire him now? Do you wait till you lose to Georgia, Florida, Alabama, and South Carolina? You're sitting there at 1-6, and you say, well, why fire him during the season? Who are you going to find? You're not going to find a replacement during the season. I don't know. You can do some teams fire coaches during the season. Happens every year. They name an interim head coach off the existing staff. How's this sound? Interim head coach, Jim Chaney. I don't know. And of course, you've got the theory floating around that maybe Phil Fulmer just installs himself as head coach. I don't know. But the point is that Jeremy Pruitt doesn't know what he's doing. He's got no business being a head coach, and I mean that's just obvious. I almost feel bad for Tennessee fans, but the thing is, this is what makes it hard to feel bad for Tennessee fans. It's like, when you're a kid and your mom tells you don't touch the stove, it's hot. You might, if you touch it, you won't touch it again. I promise you. Tennessee keeps touching the stove over, the fans anyway, keep touching the stove over and over and over and over and over again. Every coach they hire is about to be the turnaround coach. And look at the list of people they've hired. Coaches with no SEC head coaching experience. Jeremy Pruitt at least had some coordinator experience. But it's just, anybody could have looked at the Tennessee program over the last couple of years and just known this isn't a 1 or 2 year turnaround thing. Okay, you're not even Florida State, which we're going to get to in a minute, but it's just not a good scene in Knoxville. And I just don't know at some point, even with Pruitt, I don't know. I don't think there's any coach you could bring in that would turn that thing around in a year or two. So maybe if you look at it that way, you say, well, we might as well keep Jerome. But I just don't know. I really don't know. If Tennessee hadn't been through 4 or 5 coaches in the last 10 years, this would be a much easier decision, I think, in my opinion. You get rid of the guy, you bring somebody else in. The other problem is the reason you hired Jerome is because 7, 8, 9 coaches turned you down. So I don't know what big name coach or even hot young coach you would expect that you could go out and get. So it may be that Fulmer is the only answer. In which case the rest of the SEC would be extremely happy because he ain't no answer. He hasn't coached in 12 years. His last 5, 6 years were not very good. He was fired for losing to Wyoming. Jeremy Pruitt has, and that was with a national title on his resume. Jeremy Pruitt is 0-2 this year with losses to something called Georgia State and BYU. It's completely unacceptable. I don't know I don't have any advice. I don't know what they should do. It's going to be very interesting to watch all the press conferences and the fans just, going absolutely ballistic all week. Everywhere you look, Twitter, all the Vol pages, Facebook, here, everywhere. I mean, it's absolutely hilarious if you're not a Tennessee fan, but I legitimately, again, like last week, feel bad for a lot of these diehard Tennessee fans, a lot of the ones who are on, that are on this channel, the video makers, BBD and Catfish, who, put a lot of their heart and soul and time, effort, and energy into, Tennessee football year round. And they're just, it feels like BBD and Catfish and these guys who put so much time, effort, and energy into Tennessee, it feels like they're putting more time and effort and energy in than the coaches are. It feels like BBD and Catfish are walking around like this all day and just letting Tennessee shit in their mouth. I hate it for them. But anyway, it is what it is. But let's move on to the next one. Willie Taggart, your coaching career needs to come to a screeching halt immediately, or even sooner if there's a way possible. Yes, you won yesterday against Louisiana Monroe. They were a better team than you. You had another little lead there in the first half or whatever it was, 10 or 14 points. They came back. They looked like the better team the entire game, especially the second half. You couldn't stop them on defense. Offensively, you did barely enough to keep up. You're just really, really bad. And then the overtime thing, listen, anybody watching that game, I was watching the game, I said Florida State should go for 2 on that first. I said they should go for 2 because Louisiana Monroe is going to win this game. I mean, they're just better. They're going to win if this thing goes any longer. And nope, Florida State kicked field goal. But then, of course, and Florida State struggled even to score that touchdown. Louisiana Monroe comes out and scores like Florida State's defense wasn't even on the field. Then they line up and miss an extra point, and Florida State fans are acting like they won the lottery. The players are running around. It was weird to see, but you're just a disaster of a team. And if you don't do something quick, and I've been telling you this since you hired Willie Taggart, that he doesn't belong at Florida State. He doesn't have the pedigree to coach there. And that's just my opinion. And it was my opinion when you hired him. After last season, it looked like I was right. 5 wins at Florida State was unacceptable last year. Look at the talent you had. It's unreal. 24/7 Sports said you were the 5th most talented roster in America last year based on the previous 4 recruiting classes. Taggart comes in here, can't even make a bowl game. First time since Michael Jackson was black. Florida State fans saying give this guy more time. It's just his first year. Comes out this year, loses to Boise State, which we found out this weekend is not a very good team. They barely beat Marshall 14-7. So Marshall is better than you. And then this week, Louisiana Monroe, you just laid an absolute egg. Now, you got the win, but listen, anybody that watched that game considers Florida State a loser after that game. It was a terrible performance against a terrible team in Louisiana Monroe. And Willie Taggart, if you don't get rid of this guy soon, I just got done talking about Tennessee for 7 or 8 minutes. And listen, Tennessee's not having a bad season. Tennessee's a bad football program right now and has been for several years because of bad coaching hires primarily. If you don't get rid of Willie Taggart soon, as in this season, that's going to be your future. What you're seeing at Tennessee right now, Florida State fan, is your future if you don't act quickly with Willie Taggart. I don't have any hate for Florida State. Every time I talk about Florida State, man, this guy just hates the Noles. Just hates the Noles. This guy's team hasn't won a natty since 1980. Is that why you beat Louisiana Monroe by 1 point? Because Georgia hasn't won a natty since 1980? I don't know if you know how stupid you sound. Chances are you don't. But if you don't get rid of Willie Taggart soon, you're going to be the ACC version of Tennessee. Instead of being a good football program that had a bad year, you're going to turn into a bad football program. And that's a dangerous place to be because its expectations is what really has hampered Tennessee because they're bringing these coaches in. The fans' expectations of the team is way up here, but in reality, at this point in time, Tennessee's football program is way down here. Fans can't accept it because they're used to seeing Tennessee compete for SEC titles and whatnot back 10, 15 years ago. That's going to be Florida State's future if they keep screwing around and don't get rid of this Willie Taggart. Who's next on the list? Chip Kelly, 0-2, no offense. How is this possible? This guy revolutionized college football back 10, 15 years ago at Oregon with the spread and the hurry up and running 90 plays a game. Goes to the NFL. Not really much success there. Comes back, UCLA hires him. Year 1 was an absolute embarrassment. You say, well, here, it's year 1. It can take a year to install that kind of, change that offense over. And I put some stock in that. I was sort of a believer in that. But then you come out this year, you're 0-2 and you haven't even played a Power 5 team yet. I mean, pitiful. And it's not even that you're losing. It's how you're losing. No offense. You can't beat, who'd you lose to? Fresno State or something? Did I even write it down? It was a waste of time to write anything down about San Diego State. You scored 14. Lost to Cincinnati last week. Listen, Cincinnati got beat by Ohio State yesterday, 42-0. That's how far behind you are, UCLA, from mattering. Chip Kelly, I don't know what the deal is. I don't know if he's lost the interest or the passion. I don't know if he can't get the players he needs, but the bottom line is he's a terrible coach. His coaching career should be over too. And last on this list, Handy Manny.
Hola, Kelly.
Oh, hi, Manny.
Yeah, that guy. Manny Diaz. I thought this guy might have been a good coach and knew what he was doing, but it turns out I was wrong. Listen, if you want to write off the Florida loss, first game as a head coach, true freshman quarterback, fine. But now week 2, you play North Carolina on the road with basically another first-year head coach. I mean, Mac Brown has been collecting dust in the broadcast booth of a station that nobody watched for the last, 8-9 years. They bring out the defibrillator, clear, wake his ass up, drag him over to North Carolina. He promptly beat South Carolina in game 1, so he didn't seem to have any game 1 issues. And then he goes out and beats you week 2. And I don't want to hear anything about Jaron Williams because North Carolina has a freshman quarterback that they out-recruited you to get. They stole him from your recruiting class. You guys wanted him. So Manny Diaz needs to just go back to being a defensive coordinator. That's just what it is. And Miami fans, y'all are the most delusional fan base in all of college football. I listened to some call-in shows on YouTube and other places last night, and Miami fans were calling in. Now, they already want Manny Diaz gone now. Now, keep in mind that 15 days ago, Manny Diaz was the savior of Miami football. Fast forward till today, and they want him fired already. They're sick of him. They think he doesn't know what he's doing. They don't like the defensive coordinator he hired. Breaking news, Manny Diaz is your defensive coordinator still. That's how this stuff works. Now they're turning on him already. But the problem with Miami fans, kind of like Tennessee fans, is expectations versus reality. 5 rings 15 years ago is helping you just as much today as 27 rings is helping Harvard today. None. I don't even understand what the point of you guys talking about that is anymore. I mean, you've been in the ACC for 15 years and haven't won it a single time. And you only came close. You've only been even competitive in the ACC 1 out of those 15 years. The rest of those years, you are North Carolina. That's who you've been. So, running around pretending how embarrassing it is that you lost to North Carolina. No, it would have been embarrassing for North Carolina if they would have lost to you. You are North Carolina. That's who you are. You're a 6, 7, 8 win team. And honestly, you're a 6, 7, 8 win program. Outside of a 15-year period from the late 80s through the early 2000s, Miami is a consistently dumpster juice program. Go back and look 50, 60, 70, 80 years. They've been a terrible team, all but 15 years. And I'm not talking about just not being able to win national titles in those other years. The Miami team that you've seen over the last 10 years, that is the Miami program for about 95% of its history. That's just who you are. So it would have been embarrassing for North Carolina to lose to you, though, in 2. But Manny Diaz doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know what he's doing. Keep him around, too, I guess, if you want. I don't know. You know who the best coach Miami has had in the last 7, 8 years is? Mark friggin' Richt. He got you to the ACC title game. Chew on that for a while I move on here. Who looked good yesterday? Well, Bama, Georgia, and Oklahoma all blew out a bunch of nobodies. Bama found their running game a little bit there after it being missing in action week 1. Georgia found their passing game a little bit there after being missing in week 1. And Oklahoma's defense looked better than it did last week against Houston, although it was against a much worse team. Jalen Hurts had another 300-something yards and 14 touchdowns or whatever he had. Ohio State, man. Ohio State might be one of the most impressive teams we've seen so far this season. They won 42-0 yesterday. After shellacking FAU the week before, Justin Fields had another, 300 yards and whatever he had, 3 and 4 touchdowns. They looked good. LSU, impressive win over Texas. Wisconsin, 61-0. More people better start talking about Wisconsin. I'm just telling you that now. Wisconsin is the real deal. 2 shutouts in a row. You have any idea? Don't even say, who have they played, Lou? It don't matter, type patrol. You know how hard it is to shut somebody out? Well, Wisconsin's done it 2 weeks in a row. They have one of the best running backs in Jonathan Taylor. They are on an absolute roll. So they looked good too. Who else is on this top secret list of winners and losers? Copious notes. Michigan State, 51-17, second big win in a row for them. Actually gave up 67 rushing yards this week, though. Don't know what happened there. Last week, they gave up negative 70-something rushing yards. Still negative for the year. Listen, Michigan State's got one of the best defenses in America. If they can pick the offense up just a little bit, they can compete with some of these top-tier teams in the Big Ten without question. They looked good again. UCF, they appear to be the best group of 5 team again this year, beating FAU 48-14. Where did Maryland come from? Well, if you've been listening to the UNCLELOU show live all offseason, then we know at least one person that saw this coming. Resident Maryland fan, McD Sports 4. He tried to tell us all summer long that Maryland was going to be a really good team this year. Hard to take a homer seriously, especially when Maryland's been in the toilet long as anybody can pretty much remember. Turns out he was right, though. They humiliated Syracuse yesterday, 63-20. Their offense looks scary good. We'll see how they look as they move into Big Ten play there. Let's give Southern Cal a little bit of credit. They beat Stanford 45-20. Now, Stanford was without KJ Costello, but Southern Cal was without JT Daniels, so both teams was without their quarterbacks. But I've been hard on Southern Cal and Clay Helton, deservedly so. But let's give them a little bit of credit here. They looked pretty good last night in a 45-20 win. Virginia wins again. I still think they have probably the second best quarterback in the ACC with Bryce Perkins. They beat, I know it was William and Mary, but to beat them 52-17. Virginia might have the best quarterback in the ACC. What's wrong with Trevor Lawrence? More on that coming up here in a minute. Yeah. And again, shout out to North Carolina for humiliating the Fighting Handy Mannies. 24-20. A couple of teams won, but didn't look too good doing it. Minnesota, another miracle win over another terrible team. That's 2-0 for Minnesota, but 2 of the ugliest wins we've seen in all of college football this year. With another team that's in the bad win category, Florida State. I've wasted enough time talking about that dumpster program. The Barn won 24-6 over Tulane, and this was a close game for a long time. It was 14-6 for a while. Barn scored a late touchdown too. They ended up winning by 18, and the spread was 18. This is one of the most talked about spreads of the week. I didn't understand it either. Auburn on 18 over Tulane. I don't know, emotional letdown from the game last week, maybe after a big win or something, I don't know. But Auburn gets the win 24-6, but didn't look great doing it. But again, it was Tulane, and you got the win. And then Michigan, the most misunderstood, I guess, bad win of the entire day. I was getting blown up on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook. Michigan, they shouldn't even be in the top 10. They're barely top 25. They barely beat Army in overtime. Dead giveaway of people who don't pay that much attention to college football. Clowning a team for barely beating Army. You just haven't been paying attention to football, but Army has quietly been one of the best group of 5 teams over the last 3 years. They've won 10-plus games each of the last 3 years, won 11 last year. They've won 3 bowl games in a row. They had a top 20 defense last year, number 7 rush game in America at like 280 a game. They run that triple option, which is notoriously hard to defend, especially for Power 5 teams who never face the triple option. It's unlike any other offense you could possibly face. And we have seen teams, really good teams, struggle time and time again against some of these better option teams. You only have to go back to last year to see Army losing to Oklahoma in overtime. Was Oklahoma a top 10 team last year? Yeah, they made the playoffs again. Of course, they lost in the first round because that's just what they do. Still searching for a defense there. But the point is, some of you people that are clowning Michigan for barely beating Army. Now, listen, would Michigan fans have liked to have dominated that game more? Of course they would. Did Shea Patterson play well? No, he didn't. Did Michigan's offense look like people hoped it would look this year, second year with Shea Patterson? No, but they got to win. And just like most of you watching this video right now had no idea or didn't remember that this same Army team took Oklahoma to overtime last year, and no one cared at the end of the season No one will care at the end of this season, too. Now, that's not to say that Michigan looks like, one of the best 4 or 5 teams or anything. They're obviously not as good as some people thought they were going to be, at least haven't looked as good as some people thought they were going to be heading into this season. But this idea that because they beat Army in overtime somehow means they're not any good or they shouldn't be ranked in the top 10 or some people saying even the top 20, it's just potato level, 1 million. And again, a dead giveaway. And there's nothing wrong with this, but you got a large percentage of fans who watch their team play, and that's all the football they watch. So they just see a name like Army and just assume you should be beating that team by 3 and 4 touchdowns. And unfortunately, that's just not the case a lot of times. And we saw that yesterday. With Michigan. More losers here. I could have put a lot of teams on this season as over list, but I mean, I try to focus on 4 teams. But here's some other teams. Here's some other teams from yesterday. Washington. How did you lose to Cal? Uncle Lou's pick to win the Pac-12 this year. Washington. Jacob Eason comes out last week and looks like a first-round NFL draft pick, throwing for 350 yards and 5 touchdowns, whatever it was. Comes out yesterday and looks like Jake Fromm. Throws for 160 yards, and I think maybe 1 touchdown and one interception. Didn't look great. One of the reasons I didn't put Washington on this season as overlist is because this was a weird situation here. There was a huge weather delay in this game, and is that an excuse? Yeah, it is, but it's an excuse that I'm not just using for Washington. If you guys remember, I talked about this last year and all offseason, the South Carolina-Missouri game last year. Missouri was clearly a better team than South Carolina heading into that game. There were multiple weather delays in that game. That game ended up taking 6 or 7 hours to play because of all the different weather delays. It was raining so hard in that game, you couldn't see 10 yards down the field, and South Carolina found a way to pull out the win against a Mizzou team with Drew Lock, who couldn't pass the ball in that kind of weather. And the better team, Missouri, ended up losing. I think that's what happened here again yesterday. Again, Cal had the same weather delay that Washington did, so I get it. It is an excuse, and I'll be the first to admit Washington did not look as good yesterday as I thought they were. It's a bad loss, no matter how you shake it out. It's a bad loss for Washington. Easton did not play well, and Cal gets the win. Washington falls to 1-1, 0-1 in the Pac-12. So an uphill battle now for the entire Pac-12, in my opinion, to potentially make a playoff. I've been thinking that a Pac-12 team would have to go 13-0 to get into the playoff because the perception of the Pac-12 is just so bad. And this Washington loss to Cal doesn't do anything to help their cause. Oregon, of course, lost to Auburn last week. Washington now has a loss. Utah, I guess, would be the last hope for the Pac-12 in terms of going 13-0. I know there's plenty of other undefeated teams right now in the Pac-12, but we're week 2. Arizona teams aren't going undefeated. I mean, come on, just stop it. So I don't think a one-loss Pac-12 champion is going to get into the playoff over any other one-loss conference champion. So the Pac-12's only hope for a playoff now, in my mind, is Utah to run the table, which I don't think is happening. Or you're going to have multiple 2-loss conference champions, and of course Notre Dame's going to probably have to have 2 losses. But don't worry, don't worry. They're getting 2 losses. They're getting 1 in 2 weeks. Between the hedges. So disappointing for Washington there. Syracuse, I could have put you on this list. I didn't. You play Clemson next week. Your whole season came down to that game anyway. You were never winning the ACC, but this is a bad loss just because of the score. I mean, you got absolutely blown out by a Maryland team, and you just looked lost offensively for large portions of this game. Now you got Clemson next week. Some people had that game circled as one of 3 potential games that could possibly trip up Clemson. Of course, Clemson's cleared one of those hurdles yesterday, beating Texas A&M by less than the spread. Thank you for that, Texas A&M, for that late garbage touchdown you scored against Clemson. Big difference if you were watching that game yesterday for a lot of people in Clemson winning 24-3 versus winning 24-10, which is what they did. 24-3 would have hurt a lot of people who were on that Texas A&M train at -18, but they scored that touchdown and cut it to 14, and Uncle Lou cashed in. And a lot of you did too. Who else? Texas. I could have put Texas on this list, but again, the Red River Shootout is coming up here in a week or 2. I don't think a one-loss Pac-12 champion could get into the playoff. I don't think a 2-loss Big 12 champion is getting in. That means Texas has put itself in a situation now where they have got to run the table, including winning the Big 12, which means they're probably going to have to beat Oklahoma twice if they want to have any shot at the playoff. A 2-loss Big 12 champion is probably not getting in, especially if let's say you split with Oklahoma. Let's say you lose in the regular season and beat them in the Big 12 title game, right? Which will be the opposite of what happened last year with you beating them in the regular season, losing. Let's say that happens. So you beat Oklahoma in the regular, you lose to Oklahoma in the regular season. You're sitting there at 2 losses against the only 2 ranked teams that you've played. No one else in the Big 12 is any good this year. Iowa State, they're not as good as some people thought. Oklahoma State, we know they're going to go 8-4. You don't even have to know anything about Oklahoma State. They're going 8-4. They always do. TCU, probably the same thing. Texas Tech, a little worse than that. Kansas, stop it. You get the point. So you would be sitting there with 2 losses to the only 2 good teams that you played. Even if you were to beat Oklahoma the second time, it's not going to be enough to get you in. So I left you off the list today because this was an exciting and an entertaining game. And listen, Sam Ehlinger and Joe Burrows, that's got to be one of the best performances by both quarterbacks in a game in a long, long time. Almost 1,000 yards passing in that game. Unbelievable. Such a good game. I didn't want to put either team on the list, so I'm not. But Texas, I'm telling you, you're out of chances because you can't spend all offseason telling everybody, we're back, and then not make the playoffs. That has to be the goal. If you're back, the playoffs is the goal. So if you lose another game, you're going on this list. I'm just telling you now, you're welcome for leaving you off today, but don't lose another one. And you better find some running backs. I don't know what else to tell you about that. West Virginia, I could have put you on this list, but the point is, most people knew your season was over before it started. You lost every good player you had, brand new coaching staff, nowhere near the talent to compete with any decent team. And that showed yesterday in a beatdown that you got by Mizzou. Kansas, I mentioned them. How do you lose to Coastal Carolina 12-7? How do you get worse in week 2? You didn't have your best player week 1. You get him back in week 2, and somehow offensively you look worse. It makes no sense. What are you doing, Les Miles? Nobody knows. Stanford, I mentioned them looking good already. UCLA, they're dead. No one cares. So that's that. So who are the best teams so far this year in college football in no particular order? Bama, Georgia, Ohio State, Oklahoma. Those are the consensus 4 picks. I think you might have to put Wisconsin in there. When are people going to start taking Wisconsin seriously? I guess they're going to have to beat one of the big boys in the Big Ten for that to happen. But Wisconsin is a top 10 team. They have to be. So Wisconsin, you got to put LSU there now. Wisconsin, LSU, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Georgia, Bama. On the outside looking in, Michigan State, Central Florida, but they're not making the playoff. We already know. A step behind that, Florida, Notre Dame. These are 9-10 win teams. So there you go. That's it. Week 2 in the books. 4 head coaches. Career over. I'm going to try to update the UNCLELOU top 10 tonight, but I'm not going to lie to you. I streamed yesterday morning from 9 to 10:30 for College Game Day. Then I streamed all the 3 o'clock games on YouTube from 3 to 7. Then I streamed on Patreon from 7 to 11. Then I watched the Pac-12 games that were delayed till about 3 in the morning. And then I got up at 5:30 this morning to start working on this season is over video. So I may not get to the top 10 video today. If that doesn't happen, then it'll be out first thing tomorrow morning. So I'll see. Maybe I'll go and catch me a nap or something and get my second wind up. Tell you one thing right now, though, no sleep and sitting out here in this hot garage yesterday has got me teetering on the edge. Teetering on the edge. I dare one of these Mormons knock on my damn door today.